Welcome to the Project Mom Podcast. I'm your host, Emily Gorrie, mom of a sweet baby girl and an ever-evolving entrepreneur. On this show, we will explore the intersection of motherhood and entrepreneurship. We will share stories of moms just like you and me with the goal of fostering community and comfort in knowing that we are not alone in our experiences. Please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to ensure you get all the updated episodes and releases. Welcome to today's episode of the Project Mom Podcast. Today, I am chatting with Briana Ellis Hoag, a licensed architect and interior designer, and owner of Ritual Architecture, which focuses on creating elevated spaces that uniquely respond to the people, environment, and context of a place. Briana is also pregnant with her first child. So Briana, thank you for being here and welcome.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm so excited. And I'm excited for a couple of reasons. One, that we're just able to connect and kind of place a face to the name, but also we're diving into a part of a motherhood journey that I've not yet shared on this podcast. Your story will be the first one that I'm sharing as you're actively in the pregnancy stage. And it's a fun period, but also one of a lot of anticipation, right? Of what's to come. You're physically experiencing so much around change. And I want to dive into that because no experience of pregnancy and motherhood is exactly the same. So I think there's a lot of value in sharing, our own unique experiences and just providing some comfort to other women who are going through it. So I'm excited to dive into this with you today. And let's just start there. Can you share a little bit with me about your pregnancy journey? Is it at all what you expected it to be?
Well, I'll start with saying that when I was a little kid, my sister was the one that played with baby dolls and played house. And I was the one that played business and built things out of Legos and drew pictures. So not that I didn't want to be a parent or have a family, but I never envisioned myself being actually pregnant. In fact, sometime, maybe like in my early 20s, I thought maybe I'll adopt a kid or my partner would be open to that or possibly surrogacy. I just didn't have that vision in my brain. So it's been surprising to say the least because I just never even pictured myself here. So it's all been I'd say redefining is a great word. They talk about how entrepreneurship is the ultimate form of personal growth and really the fast track to figuring out who you are. And I think pregnancy and being a new mom is like taking that to like hyperdrive.
For sure. It's interesting because I had a very similar experience. I did not ever picture myself even being a mom, like let alone being pregnant. Like I never like fantasized about growing a big family or having any of that. And
probably wasn't meant till you met your partner, that you could visualize it.
Yes. And it was something that he desired. So for me, I was then able to kind of open my mind to exploring that. But it's interesting when you compare that to the narratives that we like see in our society every day, that women are meant to be moms. We choose this, how you're selfish if you don't, and all of those really unfair, pointed narratives. And then you compare that to your desire to want to run your own business and all of that. And the ability to navigate those becomes more complex.
And especially being a kid of the 90s, like feminism was very corporate minded. And, that you can have it all concept and being that go-getter in your career, but then also being a role model for your kids. I think there was a real strong push to like choose one or the other. Like being a stay-at-home mom had a stigma to it and you weren't really valuable unless you went and had a job. And so trying to reconcile all these different parts of myself has been interesting, especially because I'm 37. I really focused on my career a lot and it wasn't for lack of trying, but I didn't meet my husband until I was, 33. So this is a new part of myself. I know who I am as a professional and as a woman, but this is a new part of womanhood. And I mean, obviously, a very profound part. It's what makes us women in a lot of ways. So I would say also to add to maybe something that was unexpected for me is how much I identified with my physical body. I think I've done a lot of work in accepting who I am, but that was who I was 7 months ago. And didn't realize how much I identified with my clothing size or certain physical abilities that I had that I no longer have. Even something as silly as having an innie belly button. My belly button
Yeah,
is, like that's not who I am. It's so bizarre. It's not all what I expected.
for sure. And how are you supporting yourself through these like different opinions of yourself now? Like, how do you support yourself through that?
It's been a roller coaster. I've had moments where I've been able to really give myself grace, especially around changing up my schedule based on what my body needs. But then I've had some really low points. My husband and I went to a wedding recently that was black tie, and I bought this beautiful dress and it fit the week before the wedding. And then the day of the wedding, I put it on and I couldn't get it zipped up and I just lost it. So you can prepare as much as possible mentally, but emotional preparation, sometimes growth just comes at you in the moment and there's nothing you can do to really bypass that. You have to just accept it as it comes, even if you're not really anticipating when that is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and especially at that stage when you're like almost in the third trimester, your body's growing so quickly that, yeah, you don't anticipate perhaps what fit the week before doesn't fit the week after, and probably definitely won't fit the week after that. So it's interesting as women to explore that too, because the adverse side of that is when you become post baby and you're trying to adapt and go back to a body that perhaps you expected to return. And we're not always that blessed to do it. I mean, it's funny. I look at the scale and I'm just a couple of pounds off where I was post baby, but it doesn't hold the same. I just finally threw out a pair of pants that I was like holding on to because I was like, it'll go back, right? And technically, if you look at the number on the scale, I'm back and they should fit, but things don't really hold the same. So it's a constant evolution that I think we miss recognizing as starting during our pregnancy. Do you find that there's a comparison for you in terms of the way that your pregnancy should feel for you? Because I appreciate your vulnerability. And there's a lot of messaging out there that's like, you should feel glowing and you should be happy. You have like, you're this beautiful swollen belly baby bump. And, it's all these things. But to me, that was always kind of like an icky word. I never felt comfortable in that.
Mm-hmm. So the past couple of years have been a whirlwind, obviously, with Corona and personal changes that have happened in my life. We got married last year. We've been moving houses. And before all of this, when I kind of wrapped my head around being pregnant, I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be that super fit mom that like buff and has no complications because she's like basically trained for pregnancy. And I think I was trying to manage my fears about my body changing and not being in control of it by having that expectation for myself. But I wasn't able to really achieve that. And I didn't even really try. When we got pregnant, we had been married for 6 months and we were living in this house that in Julian, which is a remote mountain town of San Diego. And that's not at all where we plan on settling, but it was, where life took us. And I thought, gosh, I'm this, pregnant woman out of shape in the middle of nowhere. So I can't like go to the gym. The nearest grocery store is 30 minutes away. So it wasn't at all what I had wanted for myself, but it was also good because it really made me face my fears. Like I can't hide behind this image of that Instagram mom, or what I thought I could achieve as being that person. And really just say, okay, my body is going to do what my body is going to do. And I have to embrace that. And I still have some fears around labor. I've known people that have had traumatic labors, and I'm scared about that, but working through it. And then I'm also scared about my body not going back to, its former version of itself and what comes with that. I have a fear that my husband will not be as attracted to me, and that's something to work through with him too. So bringing him into all these things that are happening in my brain, it's been something I didn't even really anticipate. Like I thought it would be more of a personal journey, which it really is. Like no one else can go there with you, but also including him and like, here's how I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing. And I don't know how you can help me through this, but you should at least know that this is how I'm, what I'm scared of or what I'm excited about, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate you sharing that because I think from personal experience too, there's a level of feeling isolated in these experiences. Personally, I'm the only one going through this in my scenario, right? My husband's not growing a human life either. I don't want to burden him with all of these fears. I'm the only one that really gets it. He won't get it. And that's a personal thing for me as well. So I really appreciate you sharing that because I think there's an element of that isolation. But there's so much value to be brought to the table and the strengthening of your relationship and being able to kind of share some of these vulnerabilities with the people who love you the most and are there with you and supporting you through this. So I just hope that some of the, listeners who are following along on this conversation kind of just take that to heart and remember that there's so much power in bringing in your support team into some of these fears and sharing those.
Yeah. And you want to protect your partner from discomfort and, uncomfortable things, but you're already shouldering so much. Like there's sometimes an element of spite when I share what I'm feeling like, you did this to me kind of thing. I don't say
Uh-huh.
that. I figure, if we don't get to choose between who's having the baby, him or I, like I am going to share as much as I can about what I'm going through so that not only do I feel supported, but that he can feel like as much a part of it as possible, whether that's good or bad. In fact, something happened the other night where I'm getting a diastasis recti where my abs are separating. And this has probably been the most freaked out I've been about the changes in my body. I was trying to get out of the bathtub and my ab muscles weren't working. And he's a firefighter. So he was at the fire station at like 10 o'clock at night. And I call him, I'm like, oh my gosh, this just happened. Blah, blah, blah. And I'm crying. And he's like, I'm really sorry. Like, I don't know how to sympathize because I don't know what you're going through, but I'm here. Like, call me anytime. So there's this cool layer of support and connection that we're building, even if there's nothing really tangible he can offer me other than that emotional support. So I know we're going to have to call on that later when the baby is born and I'm breastfeeding in the middle of the night and building a good foundation for sure.
What does your support system look like kind of beyond your partner? So do you have friends that have had children that you can, connect with and perhaps be like, did you have this experience? Why don't my ab muscles work anymore? Or what does that support system look like for you?
It doesn't look like I thought it would. I lost my mom in 2016 and she was so excited to be a grandmother. She wanted to be the grandma that like showed up and like took care of the kids, like did grandma daycare kind of a thing. And I have had a hard time kind of, sorry, I might get a little emotional
That's
about this,
okay.
but
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing.
I've had a hard time filling that void a little bit. I'm really close with my sister. We just moved into a house that's 6 doors down from her. And she has 2 kids. So first, I commend her. She was pregnant for maybe 12 weeks and then our
Mm,
mom. And so she
mm,
had to only grieve and go through this very traumatic experience. But she was pregnant with her first kid and, didn't have that mom to lean on. So she went through that all by herself. I have so much respect for her, but now she's able to be there for me. So I would say she's probably the person that I lean on the most in terms of someone who's gone before me. It's obviously not what I would want. I want my mom to be here. And I know she is here in some ways, but it's not the same. So I'm so grateful for my sister. And then also, I have a bunch of friends that I've actually met through my husband who all have kids, and they're just so excited for us. And I know that they would, drop anything to be there for us. They're already helping us, set up the crib and like we all together. And we're having a big co-ed baby shower at the
oh,
end of the
yeah.
month. And, they're like talking about bringing all their kids and it's going to be this party. So I really do feel very lucky that I have a huge support system and network of people. And there's always somebody there that I can call if I need. But That's definitely not what I expected it would be.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I think there's always some bittersweet moments, right? In terms of these expectations that we have, and life throws us curveballs that honestly sometimes we could never predict. So being able to navigate those and just try to relinquish a little bit of control is easier said than done in a lot of those instances.
And also the unexpected grieving that comes in moments like this. My mom passed in 2016, so it's been quite a while now, but there's still moments that I feel like it just happened yesterday because of these things I hadn't anticipated experiencing without her. And I have to be open to, grieving in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really quite remarkable when we just take a moment to pause and think about the ways in which we are growing and expanding throughout this entire experience that we're having. And I had a interview with Hannah Abad, was one of the first interviews that I had done on this podcast. And she had shared with me this experience of trauma resurfacing through this experience. And we just can't necessarily anticipate. So trusting that we are going to have to just navigate what comes up, and won't always be easy. Won't always be easy. And it's also tough too, I think, when we compare these experiences to those of our mothers and of the generations that come before us. You mentioned it, right? A product of being raised in the 90s and these expectations of women going to work and their roles. And for me, the biggest challenge was not wanting to be a mom like my mom, in a sense. Like, my mom's probably listening to this. Mom, don't take this too hard. My mother is a wonderful mom, right? She was there for us, but I didn't want to lose parts of myself or give up parts of myself or postpone parts of myself to raise a child. I wanted to do them both simultaneously, which is not a choice that she made. So for me, that was a lot of coming up. How do I do it differently? It's tough. It's tough for sure.
Was she a stay-at-home mom?
She was a stay-at-home mom. Yeah, up until I think we were less than 10, so 7 or 8, and then she started going back into the workforce. But it was a handful of years, and it was tough for me to justify, we have a nanny right now, and it was a little difficult for me to swallow that guilt of, at 19 months old, getting somebody else to watch my daughter. It was tough. It was tough.
I have a friend who is a business owner, and she has 3 daughters under 5. And she is expressed to me many times, like, no matter what you're doing, if you're working, you want to be with your kids, or you feel like you should be with your kids. And if you're with your kids, you feel like, oh gosh, there's that work thing that I should be addressing. And I have clients that need me. And so getting used to that constant push pull and not feeling fully committed to anything because you're committed to everything. And I don't know if that's just part of, being a mom and working, and is it solvable?
Yeah, I mean, I think you raised such a valid point of, how do we navigate something that's so ingrained, and I haven't yet to figure it out. So if you crack the code, let me know and I will let you know. I feel like this is a good segue because I know you wanted to talk a little bit about this, but there's a lot of challenges too, especially in your industry, of women being successful in the architecture and interior design space and kind of building your business. You mentioned it, to me, it's referral based. So taking a step out to become a mom is a barrier to either re-entry or even just starting in an industry that really is on your shoulders. So I'd love for you to just talk a little bit about that in terms of kind of what you're facing in your industry at this time as you're, preparing to be a mom.
Yeah. So I'm sure everyone knows that architecture is a male-dominated industry. When you see an architect portrayed in film or TV, it's like Ted Mosby. It's always a dude.
Yeah.
The academic world has tried to rectify that, but there's really still a long way to go. And I think it's representative of a lot of other industries. I don't remember the exact statistics, but around 50% of architecture students are female when you start out in school. Maybe 10% of those women drop out or change majors because it's too demanding. And a lot of women that are in the program already have families and they can't juggle both. By the time that you graduate, I think half of those women actually start working in the workforce. Another 20% make it to getting your architect's license, but then only 2% or something very fractional actually make it to like the C level where they're either a partner or ownership in a firm. And, there's so many different arguments to be made about why that is. But in my opinion, I think most industries should be reflective of our population. And at least we should examine, why is this happening? And I see firsthand, all of my girlfriends from architecture school that I made, they met their partners in their early 20s and started having kids by their mid 20s. And it was more expensive to hire daycare, whether it was a nanny or a daycare program, than it was to just quit their job and stay at home with their kids. And a lot of them had a really hard time re-entering the workforce. They either got passed up by younger talent that had, more connections behind them. It's hard, when you leave an industry and take a break, you're coming back at that same pay grade. And unless your kids are in, public school, you're still facing that financial burden. So that's a 5-year minimum gap that you're creating for yourself on your resume. And a lot of people don't accept that is just because you wanted to stay home with your kids. They see that as a flaw. So I'm lucky in that I guess the silver lining of me meeting my husband at 33 was I had a really established career, but you shouldn't have to orchestrate your life in such a way that you can start a career for yourself and be a high earner before you have children. And even now, I own my own company. I can set my rates, and I'm still worried about how are we going to afford it if I need to take more time off than I anticipate. You can plan all you want for and going back to work and what that's going to look like, but you're not in control of the outcome. So it's a complex problem with a lot of variables, but I think, we haven't even come close to cracking it. And it's something that I'm really passionate about. It's the funny anecdote of even changing my name. I kept my maiden name as my middle name, and I'm taking my husband's name as my last name, but I sign all of my emails, with all 3 names because I've built a reputation for myself and all of my work is referral based. And so if people can't find me with my maiden name in some capacity, there goes the 20 years in the industry that I've, built for myself. So men don't have to deal with that. Like there's so many different ways. And I'm a feminist in that I believe in equal rights, but I'm not like smash patriarchy. Like I think men have way more value than we give them credit for, and we need to be on the same team. But there's so much about being in a patriarchal society that we haven't remedied yet.
For sure. For sure. And there's so many parts of it, right? There's so many variables to being able to figure out how to even begin to level that playing field. But I appreciate you bringing it up because the change starts with talking about it. And I just recorded an episode with Andrea Bombino, who is helping women re-enter the workforce post-maternity leave, but kind of working to help them reestablish what their wants are now that their lives have changed. And it doesn't quite address the financial aspect of it, which is the piece that kind of, ties women's hands together of having to leave the workforce because childcare is so expensive, or the hope that you can ask a family member. Not all of us have those family members available to us to be that support team. And it's funny because I always hear the phrase, it takes a village to raise the kid, but where the hell is the village? Right? It's like, where is the village? It's too expensive. We don't have those people. We were in a lockdown pandemic for a couple of years. And unfortunately, women take the burden of that when it comes to their personal growth and career development. And it's disheartening. It's disheartening, to say the least. So in terms of your perspective now, you've hit a point in your career where you've established a reputation for yourself. You have a business that is, thriving and you're able to take some time off and come back in. How are you setting yourself up for success to do that? Because when we think about maternity leave, right, it's not that vacation that sometimes our coworkers think we're entering, right? It's very real. there's a lot of demands placed on us physically and emotionally as we're going through this. So how are you setting yourself up for success and taking that time for you?
Well, there was several components to this. There's obviously the financial component, the ability to take a break, but also depending on the structure of your business and your industry, I'm not a product-based business where I can just put something on hold. I have long-term contracts that, people have invested tens of thousands of dollars with me and they're committing years to a project. And there is a clause in my contract that says, you can cancel at any time as long as we're fully paid up. But that would mean starting at square one with another architect and taking a big loss, both financially for them and time wise. So really, there is this buy-in that I needed from my clients. And I was nervous to tell them I was pregnant. I didn't know how a lot of them would react, especially because of a lot of them are men, and I didn't know they would fully understand where I was coming from. But surprisingly, a lot of them are very supportive and even excited for me. Like get gifts from them, like baby clothes and things like that. And I think that first speaks to the relationships that I built with my clients. We have a very personal connection. I try to only work with people that I would actually be friends with outside of work. So that was like the first hurdle for me in preparing, is getting the buy-in from my clients and also staging a timeline for them, saying, here's my due date, here's where your project's at, here's the goal that I have, so that when I take a few months off, you're set. Or unfortunately, I can't completely check out. I'll still need to check my emails, make sure that people are getting the information that they need, especially for projects that are under construction, because that moves so quickly. So there was first that client buy-in, and then financially, I had the foresight to incorporate my business a few years ago. So I'm able to collect disability from the state and, get that support. But yeah, I don't know how it's going to go. I think until our daughter is mobile, it'll be her and I and my computer here in my office, hanging out. And again, that friend that has the three daughters, she said, get used to working from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. And then, when she's taking a nap, answering emails, and when you're feeding her, doing this other thing. So I'm under no illusions that it's going to be easy or streamlined or look the same from day to day. And then I think once she starts crawling and walking, I'm definitely going to need to hire a nanny who will come to the house so I can get some focus work done. But that's plan A for now. Plan B might be, taking her to a daycare. And it's not what I would want, but we also have to be in good financial shape. So
I wonder from your perspective, and this may be a question we circle back with you on in a year after your daughter is born, and you've experienced it, but I wonder from your perspective in your industry, would it be acceptable or approved of, or perhaps these are not the correct words to use, to bring your daughter with you to a client meeting? Like, do you foresee some like negative like connotations around that, or would that be accepted in your industry?
I would say if I worked with more corporate clients, that would be difficult. But because a lot of my clientele we're designing custom homes for them, that's, a majority of my work. I think there's a more domestic, environment in general. We do a lot of meetings on site at their home that they're remodeling or at the property that we're going to build on. But the nature of Corona, like a lot of the client meetings have transferred to Zoom, fortunately. So unless we need to be there in person, Zoom is kind of the default. So I don't think that there's going to be a big issue if I do, take her to a construction site and walk her around. I think they'll actually find that charming. But
Yeah, that's fair. So how are you preparing to, like, with getting the clients buy-ins and whatnot, like what does that look like in terms of, are you like preparing all of the like necessary plans and paperwork or designs and getting all of these decisions made ahead of time in hopes that you can just maybe do some of that maintenance work? Is that what that looks like for your kind of ongoing projects?
yeah, so my involvement in a job kind of waxes and wanes based on what phase we're in. So I'm very heavily involved in the beginning when we're creating the conceptual design for a building. And then I'm moderately involved when we've got engineers helping us actually make the thing buildable. And then there's a period where the project goes to whatever city it's going to be built in and they review the plan. And so basically it's off my desk at that point. And then it'll come back and they'll say, change these 5 things, and then you have your building permit. And then I pass the baton to a contractor. And so what I'm trying to do is bust my buns to get all of these projects at least to the point where they're either being engineered or they're in plan check, so that I'm not the one holding the bag. And I can still be there to facilitate conversations between people and respond to questions, but the bulk of the work is not on me. So we'll see how well that pans out.
Yeah, that's fair. Are you hoping?
3 months.
I was going to say, what is the timeline in terms of the amount of time that you're hoping to take off?
So luckily, I'm due October 29th. So she'll likely come beginning of November. And a lot of clients get, rightfully distracted by the holidays and kind of tend to check out a little bit. So that coincides pretty well. So planning to really dial it back November and December. And then in the new year, figure out how to do both full-time jobs at the same time.
That's fair. That's fair. So how are you right now in terms of changing how you're approaching work? What has changed for you in terms of how you can show up right now throughout the pregnancy? Has anything changed for you?
So kind of circling back to the issue of female inclusion in the industry, I've kept a lot of really great relationships with women who have interned for me in the past. I've become kind of an informal mentor for them. We'll text and they'll ask me questions like, hey, my boss just did this, or I want a promotion, or how do I get involved in this type of project? And I'll talk them through it and answer questions for them. And it's really fulfilling. It doesn't feel like I'm being put out in any way or that I'm even giving. I'm just chatting with a friend and talking about something that I'm passionate about and being able to share my past experiences. I have a lot of colorful stories about different firms that I've worked for and things that have happened. Sharing that with them feels really great. Like, gosh, I went through this pain, and it would be wonderful if someone else could benefit from it and not have to learn that lesson the hard way too. So couple that with the idea of creating some sort of passive income for my family so that I can take a break and still bring in revenue. I've decided to create some sort of mentorship program, whether I haven't decided if it's a course or an ebook or a group coaching atmosphere, or maybe it's a combination of all of them, and whatever works best for the student can pick it up. But I want to create that. I want to take all of my embodied knowledge and be able to pass it on to somebody without us having a one-to-one conversation.
I love that. I love that. I think there's so much to be said for just sharing wisdoms of this was the experience that you had and here's what you took from that. I think hindsight is typically clearer. So if we could share maybe some of those lessons we learned the hard way with somebody else to alleviate some of that, why not? Right? Why not? So I would love to ask you what advice you would have for perhaps one of these women who had interned for you at one point, or that you're, still kind of mentoring in a way. If they came to you and perhaps one of them has, they're entering into this field, they're working for a company, they want to start a family. Like, what advice do you have for them to keep them going in this industry? Like, how can we keep more women in the architecture space who also want to personally expand their life as well?
That is a good question. I would say first, it takes a lot of foresight. So when you first go out and try and get your first job out of college, you're just stoked to be in the industry. And sometimes you just take what you can get, but that can set you on a trajectory that maybe is not in your best interest. And so part of what I want to do is help people, women especially, get really clear on the type of company that they think that they want to work for, because part of that is in the interview process, asking the company, what's your perspective on maternity leave? can you introduce me to women in the company that are of a high level that have families and ask what their experiences have been instead of just saying, I like the work that this company does and I want to be involved in that. That's only one facet of it. And so really figuring out what the company culture is, I think is a great start because then there's no surprises for you and your boss. Because if you don't have a conversation with your boss up front about, hey, I eventually want to be a mother and I want to know how that would work with us, if I'm an integral part of your team. That's an industry where it's not like you can just take one employee and plug them into a new position. There's a lot of stuff that you are solely responsible for. And so there's some risk that an employer takes on in hiring you just, straight out of the gate, giving you responsibilities and then coupling that with removing you from the team for a little bit. They really have to be ready for that and be willing to commit to it. And while I think every business should be the type of business that knows how to do that, if they're not the type, you want to know that right from the get-go and not work with them. So that would be my first bit of advice is get really clear on if you want a family, talk about that early, even if it's not for 7 to 10 years down the road, even.
Yeah, no, that's really incredible because I think it's so true, right? It's like when you think about the impact that a company has for you, right? You are their workhorses, you are completing projects on behalf of this company as a whole. But really, it's a two-way street, right? It's a two-way street and they have to want to support you in that as you support them. And there's not always that mutual relationship. There's a lot of experiences personally that I've had. I was in the corporate space for 8 years and I had left prior to becoming a mom. I just could not be in corporate environment anymore. I saw a lot of change and a lot of turnover and lack of loyalty. So being able to go in from the start and recognize the values of a business are extremely important. It feels slightly overwhelming though, to like, how do we start there? What questions do we ask? How do we know how these companies, align with us? And I think it's also important to say like, it's okay to change your mind and move and find a company over time as your career develops to find a company that is willing to do that and support you in that. So on that, I'd love to hear a little bit if you're willing to share about your trajectory in this career. So where did you start out? And then how did you ultimately branch out on your own and start Ritual Architecture?
Sure. So I got my degree from Cal Poly Pomona and I graduated in 2008. And that was when everything was starting to take a nosedive, especially in my industry. So I took the first job that I was offered. And when I was hired, there was 15 people working there. And then 2 months after I started, they laid off 7 people. So it was clear that they were keeping me on as cheap labor. But I thought, I need this job. I need to make sure that I can get my foot in the door. And I put up with a lot as a result of that. I experienced a lot of sexism that it blindsided me. I was not ready for that. Specifically on the topic of pregnancy, I wanted to have a serious conversation with my boss one day. And I remember he said, "You're not going to tell me you're pregnant, are you?" And I was a single 23-year-old at this time. And I just thought, how offensive and presumptive, but also, okay, that's the first red flag. Like, if I stay here long enough, this is going to be a difficult position to be in when I want to have a family. Not to paint this company in too bad of a light, but there were several other things that happened. And so in 2010, I quit without another job lined up and I moved back in with my parents for a few months. And I really thought hard about, is architecture even what I want to be doing? It's not that I wasn't passionate about the work itself, but it's clear that, choosing a job is just as much about the work that you do as it is the environment that you do it in. And the architecture industry just has so many flaws that are baked right into it. And I wasn't sure that I was on board for all of it. So I took a few months to really consider it. I took a job as a telemarketer. I lasted a week. I think the first day I like made some cold calls, I cried in my car. Like, I just made an old lady yell at me. Like, what am I doing?
Takes a special person to be able to do that. Some walls have
Yeah.
to go
And
up.
I had no illusions that that was going to be my career, but I needed a job. That's a funny anecdote. But while I was there, I learned some interesting sales skills that helped me get my next position. And that one turned out to be just a dream job in a lot of ways. I started working with a gentleman who it was just him and I starting out his business. He had left another architecture firm and was starting out on his own. So I got to see firsthand how that all goes. And we, over the course of, I think, 8 years that I worked there, built up the company to, I think it was 10 to 12 people. And I got to work on some really cool projects. And I have nothing but good things to say about him and his wife who ran the company. And at the end of the day, I just wasn't completely fulfilled. When my mom passed away, I kind of had that life crisis moment where I thought, I just want to be a happy person. I don't know what's promised. And is working here really making me happy, or am I feeling fulfilled? And while that was a resounding yes, maybe a few years before that, like we grow rightfully, and you shouldn't stay in a position just because it worked for you at one point or because you work for a good person. It took me so long to work up the courage to quit that job because I admired my boss so much. So when I left, I had a little bit of a nest egg set aside and I dabbled in interior design with a mentor of mine. She's an interior designer that I really respect. And I thought maybe I'll just pivot and transition into exclusively doing interior design. But then I had a past client refer someone to me to design a custom home for them from the ground up. And I thought, well, I don't have to start my own architecture firm right away, but I could do this one project. I have my license. All I need is some insurance, and I can do it as a sole proprietor and just test it out. And then it just snowballed from there. If you're a good professional with genuine connections with people, the work will come. That's something that I really learned because the business kind of created itself and thought, well, hey, I am still passionate about architecture. That's not gone away. Maybe I can fix some of the things that I didn't like about the industry by doing it on my own. And to a certain extent, I have been successful with that. And then also, there's just some things that you can't get away from. So there's a level of acceptance I'm having that, work is work and you can't make everything palatable and you can't skip to the office every morning feeling that same level of enthusiasm. There's a certain type of dedication that you have to have, especially as a business owner. So right now I'm just trying to figure out what's the next step. Like each couple of years in my career, I have evolved as a person, as a professional, and I'm at that next transition. And that also happens to be because of my lifestyle and how it's changing. So I'll say that the past couple of years have been a lot of trial and error in figuring out what my business is going to look like. And I think I've gotten to a point where now I'm doing that again. And I'm excited about it.
Yeah. There's something to be said for the decision to take action, right? It's like you are in every couple of years, right? We go through this like exploratory phase, or hopefully are going through this exploratory phase because who we were 4 years ago is not who we are right now. So hopefully each and every one of us are embracing that and allowing ourselves to reflect. But right, the piece that you had shared about just starting with one project, you didn't have to start this big thing. And just by taking that one action showed you that this was a feasible opportunity for you. And it could have very well gone the other direction, right? It could have absolutely shown you that maybe an architecture firm wasn't the way to go and fully interior design would have been the way, or a complete 180 in a different direction. So there's absolutely something to be said for not paralyzing ourselves and fear of what could this be and what's the next step and all of that. And just taking one action to kind of get a little bit more clarity on what our path looks like right now. And I think, right, you're experiencing it as you're becoming a first-time mom. A lot of us who already have children are experiencing it in the sense of, I tried this for the first year of my daughter's life. I was like, this isn't it. This is terrible. I need to change it right now. And it came much quicker for me in terms of what my next step needed to be. So we're always constantly evolving and changing. And I just really appreciate you sharing that. So as you're looking at this next step, right, we have all these hopes and these wants and, the hope to get this time off and bond with your daughter and get these projects to a point where you can hand them off for a little bit. What is your long-term goal with this business? Is it more of these mentorship programs? Is it continuing to keep on a client base? What's your long-term hope as it stands right now?
I think there will always be an element of pure project-based client work. There's nothing more fulfilling than seeing something that you've worked on for years come to complete fruition, especially like a building. It's like the ultimate manifestation of an idea, a creative idea that I can have, and something that's very much a part of who I am. Like before I even knew what an architect was, I was playing architect as a kid, And so I have to honor that part of myself. And it would be wonderful if I could get to a point where I say, I take 2 clients a year and I focus solely on your homes because I have these other means of income that are supporting me. And that allows me to be super present with you and just really do this for the love of the game. So I'm not necessarily a planner, but I like to hold on to visions. And then however life gets me there, I'm open to. So my husband and I have a few rental properties that we make some income off of. And then, coupling that with the perks of his job, like he is a firefighter, so he works for the city. He has an amazing pension, amazing benefits. I don't have to pay for health care. Like that's huge. That's a burden lifted off my shoulders. So I'll say that while I don't have a plan for my business, I have a vision for what my life will look like. It's going to be one of, personal fulfillment, creative expression, financial support, and just overall freedom, feeling like my life is what I want to make it at any point and that I haven't backed myself into a corner. And I think that also speaks to a lot of the mental gymnastics we do when we commit long term to a certain industry. We put labels on ourselves, and that limits you. If I just only ever thought of myself as an architect, I would only ever have been an employee of a company. Maybe I would have worked up the corporate ladder at that company and eventually become a partner. But I think about all of the amazing life experiences that I have had because I have said, maybe that's not just who I am. Maybe there are other parts of life to be explored outside of that label.
Yeah, it's really quite beautiful. I think the approach that you've taken to this, because there's a million things that are going to get thrown at us that we're not going to be able to foresee, but we will navigate. And to have this long-term feeling of how you want life to be will absolutely lend itself to getting you there. So that is beautiful. And I appreciate you sharing that. And I want to just ask quickly, so we have all of these pressures on us and these goals that we have and the ability to kind of know where we want to be. How do you rest right now? How do you recharge? What gives you the strength to, get up and start over again?
Well, rest is mandatory right now. Even if I'm not napping, my body is telling me you have to go lay down. So learning in a very literal sense how to take a break. I still wrestle with the guilt about that though, if I don't clock 8 hours of work a day, what does that mean? Have I failed? Have I not lived up to my own expectations? And underneath that, it's the expectations that I perceive from other people. So trying to really reframe how I perceive myself in other people's eyes allows me to take a break. If I don't have a client that's knocking on my door asking, hey, where's that thing? I don't have to assume that they're upset with me, which I used to do. I make up these stories about, well, that person, I told them I would have that thing 2 days ago. And so even though I haven't heard from them, I'm just sure that they're, bubbling up with
They must be upset
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And turning that off and just saying, I'm doing the best that I can do. I'm giving it 100%. And if that person truly has a problem, I trust that they'll vocalize it. And if they don't, then that's on them. I can't control their behavior, but I can control how I feel about my efforts. So I think that taking a break is just as much like a mental exercise as it is a
Mm,
physical one.
yeah, for sure. For sure. I think there's a lot of value of you just sharing that because I think there's a lot of us who do put a lot of pressure on ourselves to produce so much throughout the day and on any front, professional front, at the home front, I get my kids to school on time, like all of these pressures that we are possibly putting on ourselves that not many other people have that opinion about us. And if they do, it's not really our problem. So, being able to reframe that, I think, is so important. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Especially if you like come from the corporate world, you've
Mm-hmm.
been trained to think a certain way. And so unlearning a lot of that has been a challenge too. So I will say like that's something to give yourself grace about.
For sure. For sure. I mean, I love that you highlighted that because it's like the 9 to 5. Are we working within these like corporate set hours? Are we responding to people who are paying us fast enough? Right. All of these challenges that were instilled in us. So such a valid point. I am still learning that. I'm recording in an office space that's not mine. I'm usually in my house. And I woke up this morning, I had a little bit of trauma bubble up. I was like, what am I so anxious about? And I used to work in sales for a advertising technology company, and I would go into client offices and I would make sure I had to have all the goodies so I could be like welcomed, with open arms in the door. And then I was selling something and I had that pop up today. Internally, I was like, whoa, I'm literally just using an empty office. I don't have to talk to anybody that I don't normally talk to, and I don't have to bring anything. Did I bring croissants? Yes, I did, because I'm using somebody else's space. But it's instilled in us, and you don't always recognize that until it happens. So I experienced that just today. It was quite alarming. I was like, what is in this pit of my stomach right now? It was quite strange, but I appreciate all of the vulnerability that you shared with us today. And I want to wrap it up quickly and just hand it over to you really fast to have you just share with our listeners where they can find you, where they can check out your work, where they can engage with you, and perhaps take a look at any future mentorship programs that you're offering.
Sure. Instagram or my website would be the spots. You just look up ritual architecture for either of them and you'll find me. I don't do a whole lot of behind the scenes posting on those. I just kind of share, here's the work that we've completed, what we're working on. It's more of like a portfolio. So I'm getting close to launching another Instagram account that will be Briana Ellis Architect. And that's where a lot of people can come to either get good information about industry specific topics related to architecture, but also if you're just a new emerging professional, I think there's going to be a lot of value there because it's so translatable. There's not going to be a lot of posts that I'll be speaking about how to draft something or certain building techniques. It's going to be interpersonal things like how to navigate a relationship with a difficult boss, or like we talked about how to talk about someone's maternity leave policy and anticipating that. So I'm excited about that. So I would say that would be a good place to go to.
Absolutely. And that is so invaluable. So I really honor you and applaud you for starting that and putting that into the world. And I'm excited to follow along with that too. And we'll add all of those links in the show notes here. And then as soon as that one's live and up and running, we'll make sure to get that in there as well. So as people find us, they will be able to find you. So Briana, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It was lovely.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you liked what you heard, please help us out and leave a review wherever you listen, and consider sharing with your friends. If you're interested in learning a bit more about the project or want to share your story, please visit our website linked in our show notes below.